When a propaganda arm of a fascist regime has the ability to reach 70% of the households in America, you have to understand, you have to cope with the fact that this is not normal. East Coast Radio.
Nobody likes me. Nobody likes me. But that's okay, because I don't like y'all anyway. And I don't like y'all anyway.
We need to pay attention to all this stuff. And don't muddy the waters. Don't let your mind get sidetracked. Because you need to remember that when, it's going to be time to vote again soon. So it's going to be local elections, all this stuff, everything, all these elections. You have to remember that the Republicans would rather collude with Russians than collude with Americans.
Them Staten Island niggas still puffing them dust blunt.
Donald Trump is a white supremacist who enables white supremacists. No lie. I mean, that's accurate. It's an accurate assessment of the situation.
Them Staten Island niggas still puffing them dust blunt.
Dragnets. How do they work? Just say no. Yeah. Here's the problem with just saying no. You can go about your life trying not to do drugs, but you turn on the news and you see Wigmaster over there talking about public health emergencies. That's why drugs are hard to stop. Because of people like that. Big week. It's always a big week. Can't we please have an uneventful week? That's all I want. All I want is one.
Them Staten Island niggas still puffing them dust blunt.
Oh, Jay, why are you wearing that resist shirt? What are you resisting? Bunch of isms and trees. Bigotry, misogyny, racism, fascism, and sexism. The people here are the people on the South Shore, in the rich neighborhoods, the richer neighborhoods, not the poor neighborhoods, are brought up on bigotry, hatred, and classification of, societal roles.
Hey, yo. Who's in the house? Dyze in your house. What goes on, peeps? It's Friday, it's the afternoon, and we are back with another action-packed edition of Dyze in your house. It is the 20-minute recap show that comes to you every Friday here on East Coast Radio. So what you're going to do, if you want to keep up to date with all of the things Dyze in your house and East Coast Radio, here's what I need you to do. I have instructions. Don't worry, I'll spell it out for you. You pick up your smartphone. You go to the podcast app. If you don't have it, you download it. You go to iTunes. You go to wherever you get your podcasts, right? iTunes, go to YouTube, go to the podcast app, either one. And you will search in East Coast Radio. That's East Coast Radio for the least heard voices. And you will get all of the podcasts, all of the podcast goodness that can't fit into the Monday edition of the Jay Perks podcast. For instance, this Monday, we're going to cover the latest in the Mueller probe. We're going to talk about Facebook. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about China. And, I mean, right now, that podcast is looking like it's going over an hour. I mean, that's right now, and it's only Friday. So, things can, there's a good chance after 5 o'clock today, some news is going to break, hence put me in a new position for Dyze in your house on Friday. But today, for Jay Park's podcast on Monday. But today is Dyze in your house. It's Friday. It's the recap. It's the prelude. It's the pre-show. Things we couldn't fit in. And trust me, there's a lot. And I almost did two topics today. But okay. Something big that was getting reported on a lot this week is the Sinclair broadcast group and the hostage script they made their news anchors read across most of the stations in America. Let's explain. Sinclair Broadcast Group, they own TV stations. Those TV stations run local news, 10 o'clock, whatever, the action news, whatever it is. So they run they run television stations across the country. A lot of those television stations, most of them, all of them, have an 11 o'clock news with the 2 local anchors talking about local news. I mean, all news stations have that. But Sinclair Media Group, Sinclair Broadcast Group, that owns all of those stations, there's this thing called must-run content, right? And I'll explain how I know this in a second. Must-run content means that you are given a story by your corporate overlords, basically. You are given a story by the bosses, and you have to run that story. And, that's just what it is. You have no choice. It's a must-run. It's not like, oh, I don't think it's newsworthy. It's coming from above. You're told to read it. So they had, Deadspin this week, in some great journalism by them. Journalism, underline it. In some great journalism by Deadspin, they mashed up all of the local media, all of the local TV news stations, reading the same exact script. The same word for word. I mean, it's one thing. It's one thing if you hand the anchor the thing and he's like, I'm gonna put my own spin on it. Not even put my own spin on it, but I'll add some words to make it not look like, a hostage takeover, which is what this was. So Deadspin mashed up all of the local news, saying the script at the same time, in sync with one another. And it was scary, it was creepy, it was like something out of a movie, and like, the ending line, I don't know if it's irony, because Alanis Morissette did that song, and I'm not quite sure what the definition of irony is. But when they're all standing there, and at the end they say, this is a danger to our democracy, you kind of sit back and say, or is state-run media a danger to our democracy? Which one is more dangerous? Because the propaganda wing of the White House stretches beyond the Fox News channel. It goes to all of these Sinclair-owned stations. And it's getting worse because the Sinclair group is going to buy Tribune, and that's going to give them 40 more stations. Sinclair is going to own 70%. Is going to be in 70% of the affiliates across the country are going to be owned by Sinclair Broadcast Group. Now, that's, not how the Fourth Estate works. The Fourth Estate being the media. The media is an independent, one more time for the people in the back, independent, it's an independent body of America. Ask Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson said, you give me a Congress or you give me a free press. I'll take the free press. Or he said politicians or press. He said, I'll take the free press anytime. It's accountability. Make sure no one's, being oligarchy. But Sinclair, first of all, a couple of months ago, or it might have been even last year at this point, John Oliver did a long-form story on Sinclair Broadcast Group, and I've said it on the Jay Parks podcast before, but if there's any news that you need to watch, let's just say you don't like turning on the news because you don't like hearing about all the partisan debates, and let's just say you don't like hearing about, maybe you voted for Trump, and you don't like to hear the smearing, maybe you don't like to hear the conspiracy theories on Fox News. And that's cool, but I suggest that every American who is American, who cares about America, watches John Oliver. Because John Oliver once a week does a story that's important. And the story that's important, he always does it in a long form, and it's not usually a partisan thing. Sometimes it's elections in other countries. Sometimes it's Trump. A couple of months ago, it was Sinclair Broadcast Group. So as soon as I saw the Deadspin article that said Sinclair, I said, oh wow, yeah, because John Oliver said it a couple of months ago. I knew it was coming. Because John Oliver and his team dig deep. They do journalism. Underline it again. Journalism. Now let's talk about journalism. Let's talk about it for a second. First, I want to take you back to college. That's right, folks. The College of Staten Island, where I, Jay Pauks, attended school until they kicked me out because I couldn't pay for because I ran up some money on student loans because they took away my financial aid because they deemed that I wasn't poor enough, I guess, to go to school anymore. Pretty sure I didn't gain any dollars in the years I was going to school. Anyway, so I wasn't majoring, but I was gonna major in communications. I know that you can't do anything with that degree. I'm aware of that. Don't make fun of me. I like communications. So, what I really wanted to do is, I don't know if you can tell, but I really wanted to get into radio. I really wanted to pick the songs on the radio. But anyway, so I used to take journalism classes, communication classes, because it's like the same communications as you have to take some journalism classes to go along with it. Which is fine, I like journalism. Besides that, I took a linguistic class, but that's more language. Oh man, don't take that class. So I had this teacher, Brian Cogan. Professor Brian Cogan, who I follow on Twitter. At the Brian Cogan or Brian Cogan. Anyway, he's an author. He wrote books. He's got a book out, The Encyclopedia of Punk, right? And he's got all books like that. He's got an anthology of South Park. The complete Monty Python series. Like, this was my teacher. And yeah, he told, we had some good times in class. But if I'm going back to things I've learned, teachers that taught me things, I learned the most. Probably from Brian Cogan. Okay? Now, one day, listen, I always took Cogan's class. Whether it was Com 101, Com 150, there was something else. There was a communication/journalism class I took where we had to, we did a half hour in front of the class as a news broadcast, included with commercials. We had to fill 30 minutes. We had little scenery changes and stuff. I was the weather guy. We were Fox News. And then I complained afterwards that the class didn't vote for my team, even though I brought pizza to the class. I thought that would get me the good vote. But anyway, okay. Learned a lot of things in Brian Cogan's class. Watched some films. There was one film, All the President's Men. To this day, and this was like 5-6 years ago, but All the President's Men is one of my favorite movies of all the time. Because it's got so much action and adventure. No, but it's a good movie. I really like it. I love, movies like that. Like conversational-driven movies. Anyway, so All the President's Men we got to watch. He also showed us Anchorman. He's like, listen, Anchorman's funny, but some of it is true, and you should pay attention to it. He also showed us what I think is probably the worst half hour in the history of television. A show called Anchorwoman. It is a comedy on Fox about this model type chick who goes to a Fox affiliate station and, she's a model, but she's gonna go read the news. Because, they want to get ratings. So that show was on Fox in 2007. And Lauren Jones is the host. Not the host, she's the one who's gonna read the news. And she has a marketing company now, which is interesting. Okay, she's a model, former Playboy model. They put her on the news. So the moral of this lesson was that, listen, everybody reading the news on television is not necessarily a journalist. And there's a difference between people who are journalists and people that are news anchors, as you will see by watching Anchorman. It's funny, but there's a lot of truth to it. Whereas not everyone on television who is reading you a news story is actually a journalist. So I know that. So that's been in my mind for a while. And that's why I tell people, listen, I know it gets annoying. But especially with this Sinclair stuff. If the only news you watch is your local news, I mean, listen, it's cool that you trust those people, and I get it. You've been watching them for a long time, and you trust them, and they know what's going on in your neighborhood and stuff like that. But if any of those people that you trust was a part of reading the must-run Sinclair script, then those people should not have your trust as much as they do. Those people betrayed you. And they did what the corporate overlords told them to do. Now, it's a tricky situation because as Bloomberg was sharing stories earlier this week, in the contract of the Sinclair news anchors, it says if they don't listen to what they tell them to do, they have to pay back 40% of their salary. What kind of draconian stuff is that? So I get it that if you really want to get in the news business and like you're on the cusp and you have a chance to get in, but then this comes up, I get that some of these news anchors might be saying to themselves, okay, this is just a hiccup. This is just, don't worry. I'll read this. People are going to forget about it. And then I'll be able to do some real news. I'll make up for it with some real news in the future. But Deadspin has you. And now no real news place is going to hire any of you. Besides Fox News and Sinclair Broadcast Group, which is going to own 70% of the stations in America. And it's weird that the regime blocked the AT&T Time Warner merger, or is it it's AT&T something else, because of a monopoly, but the regime is going to allow Sinclair to buy Tribune and own 70% of the affiliates in the country. Now, the FCC definitely has a rule that you're only allowed to own. There's a cap on how many stations you're allowed to own. I don't know what happened to that cap. That was probably a regulation that was deregulatorized by, the regime. But either way, if you looked at your local newscaster and they looked you in the eye and you were out watching TV and they looked into your living room, into your bedroom, into your kitchen, and they said to you, this is a danger to our democracy, while endangering democracy, they have betrayed you. And I'm not saying you should be like me and watch MSNBC for 23 and a half hours a day. I'm not suggesting that at all. Pick a half hour. Because the thing about the partisanness of television stations is that MSNBC does politics. They've done politics forever. They always do politics, just politics. There is no partisanship. They have, right now, this morning, I was watching Morning Joe, former Republican congressman. Last night, I was watching Nicole Wallace, whose guest was Steve Schmidt. They used to work in the Bush White House. A lot of these people are Republicans who are like, what is this? What is going on? So, yeah, I get it that, maybe people think CNN might be skewed a little towards the left, and MSNBC might seem like it's skewed towards the left because, Trump sucks, and they call him out for things that he does that suck. But it's not. I mean, I'm sure there was a host on MSNBC that was complaining that Obama put Dijon mustard on his burger. God forbid, they probably had a fit when he wore the tan suit on Easter. Looking spiffed to death, though. That tan suit. So those people didn't... So what I'm saying is... you might not be a fan of, national news. But if you want to actually, get a temperature... You have to change the channel if you want to get a temperature of what's going on. I turn on Fox News sometimes to get a good laugh. To hear about the political jihad that's going on. I will never forget that. It's weird. And that's why, listen, the 11 o'clock action news or whatever it is. Truth be told, the action news is what airs in my girlfriend's town. And I looked it up, and actually action news wasn't on the Sinclair list, so good. I'm glad about that. It didn't reach the woods just yet, but it's getting there, slowly but surely. So, Sinclair Media Group, Sinclair Broadcasting, whatever the company is, any local news you're watching that comes to you with some sideways stuff, talking about fake news on the news, those people aren't journalists, those people are actors. So you can't say, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that those people aren't journalists. They're not journalists. They're not. It's not like they have their journalism cards taken away. They were never journalists. They're actors. They're Will Ferrell in Anchorman. That's what they are. And the quicker you realize that Sinclair is nothing more than a propaganda arm for the Republicans, then you'll start to understand, So, in the crazy world of right-wing media, you have stuff like InfoWars, Fox News, Breitbart, Sinclair. I mean, listen, for the media that's run by the liberal Jews, as people say, I'm very confused. Like, where are the television stations that are owned by liberal people? Where are the news outlets that are owned by liberal people? I just want to know. They're not really taking over the airwaves much. Like, scary. Sinclair is a danger to democracy. And just keep that in mind. Where you get your news from, double check all your news. Alright? That's your homework this weekend. Double check everything. Source it. Okay. We're just about done here. But I just want to give you a quick reminder of where we're going to be going. On Monday. That's right, Monday. You can tune in. You keep it locked. Follow me on Twitter at JPorks. Keep it locked to the Dare Network on Twitter, DERER Network. And you keep it locked for the latest edition of the J Porks podcast. We're going to talk about Russia. We're going to talk about Paul Ryan. We're going to talk about Mark Zuckerberg. We're going to talk about Tim Cook throwing shade like a palm tree. Woo! You wouldn't be in that position. You better not find yourself in that position in a couple of months, fam. J Porks, Dyze in your house.